Welcome, financial professionals. I am Steve Walker, Vice President of Institutional Accounts and partner for E4 Insurance Services, welcoming you to the Brew, building relationships every week. Thanks for tuning in. For those of you joining the Brew for the first time, welcome. We like to start the Brewcast by celebrating today's national days. And today, for April 23rd, we've got three really good ones. We've got National Administrative Professionals Day,
That is a big one.
That certainly is. National Cherry Cheesecake Day, and to top it all off, we have National Picnic Day. So again, a way to easily tie those three together. Pack up some cherry cheesecake in a nice picnic basket. Get your administrative professionals all together. Find some nice shaded area under a tree and have a great picnic with some of the most important people that we get a chance to work with. So great easy way to tie those ones together. So today we're wrapping up April's lineup, focusing on key person and executive benefits. Today, Phil Haug, Senior Vice President of Sales and also partner here at E4 Insurance, joins me as we review and recap what opportunities to keep at the top of advisors' minds when discussing with decision makers how to protect the business from losing its top talent. So, Phil, really appreciate you joining today and hopping on and loaning us your time and your talents and your language as we get going today. So, we've had some great brews so far throughout the month of April talking about this topic of executive benefits and key person coverage. And, really as we start about this, in my opinion, I watched Simon Sinek's TED Talk called The Golden Circle. And anybody that's seen that, knows that Simon talks about start with the why. So before we get down into the how and the what, why would advisors listening in on today's calls, why would they want to talk to their clients, their business owners and decision makers about the importance of the key contributors within those companies?
Yeah, I guess the inverse question is why not, right? So, you talk about Administrative Professionals Day. With that, you've got individuals that are integral to the success and ongoing results of a business, right? So you hear the term key people, but it's also high impact, right? And when you're looking at running a business, I look at, there's the infrastructure there's the product, there's the plant, there's the things that a business creates, but all of that gels together and becomes a profit generating machine. It becomes a business with the people, right? And when you're looking at a talent gap, no matter where you look at, when you're having discussions with civic and business leaders, they talk about how there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of jobs open, but there's not a lot of people out there to fill them, right? There is a tremendous amount of demand for good people. And if you're a business owner, small or large, the why is what can you do to help retain and reward those individuals? And when you look at the options that are available through different risk management solutions and things like that, there comes to be some really, really compelling reasons on why you want to present those solutions to your business owner clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's hard to find good people. It's even harder to keep them around from that retention and recruitment standpoint.
Yeah, you think about it, like your best employee is your competition's number one recruit. Right. So, when you look at it, that people stay for a couple different reasons, right? One of them is that they're respected. So do they have a role inside of the business? Are they rewarded? They're working hard. They're putting in a tremendous amount of effort towards it. Are they getting their rewards? And, a lot of times you can kind of kill two birds with one stone by looking at some of these, what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes, is you can drive your retention. You can show respect. You can show that they're valued, and you can forward some of those rewards to those individuals. And you have the ability and some flexibility to give them benefits today, as well as give them kind of the golden handcuffs or the golden parachute for 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
Absolutely. And it really is a key thing, because again, pay is important, but again, It's those little extra things that you can go above and beyond, because a company XYZ down the road can always offer more money, but it's
Yeah.
what are those little extra fringe value benefits that really make a key difference.
Well, it makes a huge difference. I remember, I won't date it, but a couple decades, 20 plus years ago, all right, I'm sitting in a class in college, and it's an entrepreneurship class, and we kind of folded in, we started talking about having employees, right? And our professor had actually done quite well in business and made his millions and decided to come back and actually teach. So it was kind of cool to have the perspective of somebody that, had actually done it. And we're in a class of 15 individuals, we're all juniors and seniors in college. And he said, what's the number one, when you guys are going to go get jobs, what's the number one thing that you guys are going to evaluate your job off of? And if I asked you that question, Steve, you had a bunch of college juniors and seniors, what was the number one answer that you think everybody gave?
Show me the Benjamins.
Yeah, show me how much money I'm going to make, right? Show me the money. So what ended up happening was that was not the truth, right? So then he pulls up a survey, and it's a survey of around 10,000 individuals that were working. And guess what number? It was 25 reasons why somebody either kept, took, or stayed at a job. Okay.
Benefits.
Number 19 was pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was things like time off, flexibility, pay, benefits, health insurance, those types of things, and like all the way down. And we sat there and went, no, Steve, there's no way. There's no way that pay is 19th. And he said, I'm just going to give you an example. He said, you can do, this is, like I said, 20 plus years ago. So he said, you can make $35,000 a year doing what you love with the 3% raise for the rest of your life. Or you can get $100,000 a year cleaning rest stop toilets with a toothbrush. Which job would you take? The dream job, making $35,000 a year, or cleaning toilets down the rest stop and of course everybody said, well, I'll take my dream job for 35. And he said, see, that's my point. It's not always about pay, right? But you can find other ways to reward and retain individuals that are key and high impact to your business.
Absolutely. And the other thing too that our advisors should be thinking about is, businesses, you mentioned the word a few minutes ago, risk management.
Yeah.
And those business owners, they understand that. So for anybody that works in commercial insurance, they're familiar with the word perils. What's covered? If my building burns down, my business has got fire insurance. It's got, property casualty insurance. If I get into a lawsuit, I've got liability coverage. Again, a lot of those what ifs. If my business vehicle crashes, I can get it replaced. But again, oftentimes one of the things that also goes overlooked from that risk management standpoint is, what about that top talent, my top sales individual, my CFO that has integral knowledge of the way our company and the way our industry works? If something happens to them, if they all of a sudden can't show up to work tomorrow, that's going to have a big impact on the business, whether that's revenue, knowledge, having to offset tasks. So again, not only from that reward and retention standpoint, but it's also important for those advisors to talk to the clients about what's the financial impact to the business should something happen. So again, another great way that people can really dive into that.
Right. So, well, you talk about risk, right? So I mean, like a sound commercial insurance advisor, consultant, whatever, agent, whatever word you want to use for it, they would never go onto the property and leave it unprotected against fire, theft, mechanical breakdown, like cyber security. There's this long list of things that you would never in your right mind leave unexposed, right? Or that you would never leave exposed, down to the fact that you're going to put a rider on your commercial policy to make sure that the marquee sign out on the street is covered, right? And yet, time in and time again, unintentionally, we overlook the single biggest risk. You talked about if they can't come into work, right? When it comes to employees, it's what if they don't come into work? Whether they work for the competition or something tragically happened, they're not there, right? The loss is still the same. That individual still has to be replaced, okay? And that comes at an expense. But when it comes to the small business, so a large business has a complete set of risks when it comes to making sure they're retaining people, right? A lot of times it's key individuals, it's high profile, it's CFOs, it's C-suites type stuff, or the heir apparent, the person that's coming up. But for the small business, right, each person in that organization has a bigger role. Like, think about it this way, Steve. If the CFO of Microsoft resigned today, Microsoft's huge, right? One of the biggest companies on earth. If the CFO of Microsoft resigned, would Microsoft be okay tomorrow?
Okay, they hopefully have got their succession plan in place and a successor identified. Absolutely.
But they would, stock price might take a little hit, but eventually they'd find somebody and they'd replace it, right? If they don't already have that successor in need. Now, you take a business of 25 employees, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If the business owner doesn't show up tomorrow, does the business show up tomorrow?
It might show up, but it's going to limp in, and it's going to be in a very big hardship. That is for sure.
Exactly. So the business, like the loss of the business owner, the key person, the highest impact employee is the business owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Simple questions start to get asked, like who's going to make payroll? Who's going to sign off on invoices? Who's going to make sure that the doors are open? A lot of times in a small business, guess what? It's the owner, it's the owner, it's the owner, it's the owner, right?
Yep.
So without it, whether it's a business overhead policy, whether it's a key person, whether it's a retention plan, a deferred comp, there's so many different ways you can go with it. But when you're looking at it from the advisor standpoint, you simply just have to look at the standpoint of you're protecting a risk. The
Mm-hmm.
biggest risk that any business faces is that employees don't show up to work for whatever reason it is. And for small businesses, it's if the business owner can't show up to work anymore.
Absolutely, and that's again going back to the golden circle concept. Again, we've got that great marketing piece, that 4 pillars. What is it that we do here at E4 with our advisors? And with that key person and that business owner, you're providing liquidity at the time of need to make sure the doors stay open, payroll gets met, and the widgets keep getting made. You're providing the reward and retention strategies for that top talent. You're protecting incomes. We can go on and on and on. So really, that's the why. We're not selling insurance. We're helping making sure that business can stay afloat and protecting those families. So, as we move on to that next inner circle within, the golden circle component, the how. So we know the why, we know the big picture, why we're doing what we're doing. Now, again, a lot of people kind of get lost on the how. So our advisors listening in, how can these advisors, and I'm going to ask you a few different types, maybe a couple, because an investment advisor is different from a benefits advisor. That's different from a commercial advisor. You can almost maybe combine those two, but starting with the investment advisors, the financial planners, those that are, the money managers, how can they get into these types of conversations? What entry point should they be looking at for those types of clients?
Yeah, no, for sure. And your question kind of evokes one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Oliver Wendell Holmes. And he said, "A mind once expanded never returns to its former shape." So a lot of these things, it's like, oh gosh, I've never even thought about it. But then, like, the saying, like, what's been seen can't be unseen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of this, hopefully, as you hear it, will kind of go, oh, I haven't thought about that, but I really need to know. So, like, if you are an investment advisor, at the simplest, boiling it down, typically, we're looking at it as like, well, that person is managing their investments, right? We're managing their plan. They're creating or protecting wealth, or both, right? Well, a lot of times, if we look at it from a narrow perspective, we look at it as ticker symbols and annuities and life insurance and just some basic tangible assets, right? A small business owner, I'm going to focus on the small business owner for the investment professional, right? What is, in most, if not all cases, what is the single biggest asset / investment that a small business owner has?
Themselves.
Or their business, right? It's their small business. So if you're an investment advisor, look at that business as an asset. Come in and start simple. We spent a lot of time earlier in the year talking about business valuations. We have multiple tools to provide complementary business valuations. If you're an investment advisor, look at that business as another investment. Look at that as an asset. Go in and do that valuation. So they might have a portfolio of $2 million of assets under management, but you know what? They have a $10 million business. Right? Your recommendations for that individual are going to be quite a bit different than if they had $10 million of investable assets, and a $2 million business, right? So a lot of times it does start with evaluation and then coming in and having that next level conversation of, all right, Mr. Business Owner, Mr. Steve, talk to me about your business. What are the key components of that, right? What are the things that keep you up at night? What have you done to make sure that you're protecting your employees and protecting your future within your business, right? And a lot of times at that point, the conversation starts flowing. And that's when you can come back to us at E4 and say, hey, this woman has a business. It's highly successful. She's concerned. She's got a director of accounting and she's got a chief marketing officer that are integral to the business. She really wants to make sure that they're protected, right? So a lot of times it's just asking the questions. Because when it gets into the how, man, I tell you what, it's a spider web. There are, depending on the business, depending on the corporate structure, depending on the needs, depending on the risk, there are so many different ways that you can take it. And that's when you have to come back and rely on the experts. So investment advisors, easy conversation. Look at that as an asset. Go get evaluation on that asset. It sets you apart. One, it sets you apart from everybody else. Nobody's having that. It's very uncommon to have that. I shouldn't say nobody. Don't speak in absolutes, right? But very few advisors are actually looking at that holistically, going, hey, you've got this. This is going to impact. Now, important second thing, not to go on it. At some point, Steve, what is that business owner going to do with that business?
At some point, either going to sell it, gift it, or transfer it.
They have to monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can do that in numerous different ways. Well, if you're an investment advisor, would you want to know about a substantial windfall coming if
Absolutely.
the business were to be sold or transferred, right?
Absolutely.
Or if you could have a very cost-effective way of transferring the asset to create a cash flow, right? I mean, you do kind of blow the lid off Pandora's box when it comes to the opportunities on how you can really mitigate all of these risks and create a broad-based solution to somewhat of a complex problem.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's you hit the nail right on the head there. And as we transfer, so again, that's the money managers, like you said. I mean, I love, the concept of, hey, you wouldn't put 90% of your portfolio in a small cap stock. Why are you going to put 90% to 100% of your wealth in a micro cap stock?
Right.
Known as your own business. You're betting on yourself. But again, understanding that value of the business is integral. So, if we look at the commercial insurance advisors or the benefit advisors, they're working with the owners, the head of HR, those types of conversations. And it's they're a little bit different conversation. But if you're a commercial advisor or a benefit advisor, what are some of the ways you can kind of crack that door open to start the conversation? You don't have to be an expert, but to get them uncomfortable a little bit so that our advisors can then come to their RVP here at E4 with an idea. How do we get in with these types of advisors?
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, I do think it's simple in its genesis, but it's difficult to remember to do it every time, right? I mean, if it was easy, we'd all do it, right? Yep. The commercial insurance advisor, the true commercial producer, professional, probably has a better insight to the business owner than really any of the advisors, because they understand, they have about a 359-degree view of what's going on. Let's make it 360 by closing up the 1% by asking one question, right? The one question we talked about the risk. Simple question I'm asking as a commercial advisor, as a commercial producer, is who are the people that if they didn't show up tomorrow, your business would be negatively impacted? Give me the names of the individuals, if they didn't show up tomorrow, your business would be at risk. Every single business owner is going to be able to tell you, and it's names you probably wouldn't think about, right? But they're going to be able to tell you if Jane, if Joe, and if Steve don't show up, we're in trouble.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what have you done? And by the way, don't forget yourself. Now, as a commercial producer, you guys say, well, don't forget about you. What happens to your business if you don't show up? And they go, oh, now we get back to the whole Oliver Wendell Holmes, mind once expanded, never returns to its former shape. And you go, oh, yeah, I kind of matter too, right? And then you have the next second layer question is, what steps have you taken to make sure that you're retaining and rewarding those key people. Now, as a commercial advisor, I love questions that there's no wrong answer. Okay? If they say they have nothing, what does that give us an opportunity for?
The blank canvas.
right. With all the colors of the color wheel, right? If they say they have something, what does that give us an opportunity to do?
It's us in the right color palette.
They understand the value of it. They already got something for us to come in and look at it. So I either have the opportunity to positively impact the business, or I have the opportunity to review and make sure that what they believe in is structured properly.
Yep.
Wrong, like there is no wrong answer to that question. Okay. So I'm asking them, what have what are you doing? Who's important to the business? And what are you doing to retain and reward those individuals? There's no wrong answers to those things. Right. So from there, it steps into the next thing. Now, one thing that's coming up a lot, and I do kind of somewhat blur the line between benefit and commercial, but there are some differences. But the one question that both benefit advisors and commercial advisors can ask is talk to me about if there's a partnership. Okay, talk to me about your buy-sell plan. If there's more than one owner, what's your buy-sell plan? What is your legacy plan? Okay, if there's one owner, I'm asking, what is your transition plan? Okay, and again, they either have nothing and you can be of service, or they have something and you can be of counsel. Okay.
Yep.
Now, let me ask you just a real simple, hard question. Steve, if you and I are business partners and we have a properly structured and legally correct buy-sell agreement, and there's a little provision in there that talks about disability. Okay. It's my experience that more often than not, those disability obligations are not funded, which in and of itself is a problem. But let me ask you, if you and I are business partners, whose definition of disability are we going to use?
In our business buy-sell agreement, Phil, we're going to have the contractual language from a properly structured and set up disability buyout policy. So we have a disinterested third party making that determination. Unfortunately, most of the time, you're determining if I'm disabled, I'm determining if you're disabled. We're both going to fight each other, and it leads to more headache than good.
Exactly. So you say, it's my definition, it's your definition, right? Good luck on those matching up. Okay. Then we could say, well, you know what? Let's use Social Security. Well, so I got a pop quiz for you. Do you have statistically, right? Do you know how long the average Social Security DI determination takes? This is from Social Security themselves. So how long does it take from the day I file my disability claim to the day I actually get approved for it? What's the average?
I've heard the statistic. It's blanking me, so I'm gonna turn it back to you. I know it's long.
It's about a year. It's about a full calendar year. Okay. So second question is, even if you use Social Security disability, does your business have the wherewithal, the cash, or the capital? If one of you couldn't be part of the business, do you have enough reserves to fund the business for the next 12 months? Even if you have it, most businesses don't. Okay. So you look at it from the standpoint of there's a huge opportunity from the benefit side. Again, to me, it's an easy conversation to say, hey, you know what, mentioning you're probably doing the short-term disability. You're probably offering the long-term group disability. You may or may not have a conversation about, individual disability conversations. But hey, while we're on the topic of disability, it reminds me, we need to review your buy-sell agreement to make sure that that's covered inside of it.
Yep.
Right? Take what you're already doing, the commercial advisor, the investment advisor, take the valuation of the business, include it in their overall portfolio, right? That's an easy bridge. The commercial advisor, if your business is at risk, what employees is your business at the biggest risk if they can't show? And I wouldn't say don't, say can't. Or don't, depending on how you want to use it. And then from the benefit side of things, so let's talk about your disability. Let's review your buyout. Okay, if it's a single owner, even more important.
Yep,
Even more important,
absolutely.
right? So take what you're already familiar with. You talked about being uncomfortable, right? Ultimately what I want to do is make sure that the customer is a little bit uncomfortable, right? Kind of squirm a little bit in their seat, because ultimately there's things that they haven't thought about. That's what you want to do as an advisor, right? So people will ultimately respond to pain because they want to avoid it. And that's where you can use you talked about the golden circle, right? We talked about why, now we get into how, and now we start getting into that question of like, well, what do we do? Right?
Yeah.
Man, you hit the grand slam when the client goes, well, what do we do? Right? Well, glad you asked. Let me show you.
Absolutely. No, and a lot of great information just in that last couple minutes, within, how do we have that conversation? It's kind of funny. It popped into my head. I'm glad we're doing these brewcasts now, because it's kind of fun. Maybe our awesome marketing team can throw something in on the edit. But when you said pop quiz, how do you bring this up? I just popped to the Keanu Reeves movie Speed. So pop quiz hot shot. Maybe we can build that. Maybe we can build that into the brewcast here, and if not, we'll see.
Yeah, we just got to keep this bus moving at 55.
Absolutely. I know we've got a couple other bullet points that we talked about we want to hit on, Phil, and in the interest of time, just to make sure that we keep things high level. One of the things was small company, big company.
Yep.
And you hit on that. And really one of the things that hopefully everybody identified from a previous brew with Corey Principal, and it works on the life side and the disability side. If you get a big enough company, 5 or more on the disability side, 10 or more on the life side, 5 or more if they're doing both, depending on the occupation. But we can really eliminate the underwriting hassles a lot of times. Again, there's some caveats to what they do, a little bit of pre-screen, but the guaranteed issue on the life and the guaranteed standard issue on the disability side. So for those mid-sized and large companies, want to make sure to remind our advisors that we do have some great guaranteed issue underwriting options available. And as we close out here today, Phil, I know we talked a little bit on the golden circle again. We touched on the why, one of those pillars that we talk about, providing the reward and retention strategies, providing the liquidity, making sure the business is okay if the what if happens.
Yep.
We got into the how. How do we, get into that door opener? And lastly is the what. And I'm going to change my question from what I originally, what we originally talked about, because I know you can think good on your feet. I'll give mine first, and then I'll give yours. But if you were to say, hey, if you'd had 30 to 60 seconds to describe to a business owner, that key decision maker that says, why would I want to do something like this? Or what could it look like more appropriately? One of the best tips that I ever saw, as I give you a little bit of time to think about what your best tip was, it's only fair, I think, is if our advisors take out a piece of paper and you just draw a horizontal line. And again, because you've got key person protection, you've got retention and those types of things. Mm-hmm. What does the menu look like? So you got that horizontal line. On the left side, write the word reward. On the right side of the line, write the word retention. Mm-hmm. And as you're having that conversation with the business owner, one of the best things you can talk to them about, especially in those reward and retention strategies, is, hey, Phil, we talked and identified these 3 people, these 10 people, whatever the number is. Here's your key contributors. Now, when we look at putting a plan together, we've got this pendulum. We've got reward all the way on the left side. We got retention all the way on the right side. Reward, think of it as this is a cash bonus. I'm writing the check. You get instant gratification. You are getting that reward handed to you day one. Mm-hmm. You can go and spend that money however you see fit, whenever you see fit. 100% reward. I get the carrot. I have 0 retention, because as soon as that clears my bank, I can go wherever the heck I want. Mm-hmm. On the other end of the spectrum, it's, again, you think of the non-qualified deferred compensation. This is a promise. It is a piece of paper that says, if you fulfill X, Y, and Z, I'm going to give you this plan at the end of age 60, 62, 65, 10 years, 50, whatever that is. There's 0 instant gratification. It's all reward down the road. And we can build that 100% reward, 100% retention, or anywhere on that scale. tell me where you want to be, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, and then that'll give us an idea. So that's kind of one of the best ways I found you can start identifying where we want to be. Any last bits of knowledge you want to share, Phil, as far as what's a great way to bring it up?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about, it's funny, you talked about the reward, right? What you explained there is brilliant. You know, it's having that discussion and visually showing them, you know, where do you want to be on the spectrum, right? And what's interesting, I worked for, worked at a different place for 20 years, right? And we would get bonuses, and it was always interesting, just year after year after year. Guess when most mid-level executives decided to take another opportunity, right? It was usually the day after the bonus hit, right? It was almost like a mass exodus day, right? So you look at the implications of a cash reward, it's fantastic. However, it doesn't drive anything. If anything, you can just figure out when you need to start recruiting people, you know, afterwards. I really think that the most effective way to connect with an individual is you have to ask them good questions, and you have to have them tell you, right? So I go back to basic sales 101 is, you know, if you're telling, you're selling, and if you're asking, they're buying, right? My goal and my objective is not to get the business owner to just jump on something today. This is a plan to protect the business for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So every single year, they're going to get an invoice. They're going to get a statement. They're going to get a premium notice, right? I want them to know every single year, this is why I did it. So I'm asking them questions, right? My first question is, how important, and this is a simple question, but how important are the people in your business to the success of your business? If I don't think that my people are important, well, then I'm just going to pack up my briefcase and I'm going to go, because what's the point, right? How important is it that you keep your people producing and growing within your company, right? And then you want to get that answer. Okay, well, now we've just created, it's the precursory questions to then getting what you talked about is, all right, let's talk about that. You value your people, you want to keep them. Here's the scale, retention and reward, or reward and retention. Where do you want to fall? And then you go into, you know, what's the best fit. So biggest takeaway from all of this is there are inherent complexities to what the solutions are to these problems, right? It is not our expectation that that all of our advisors have all of the knowledge on all the solutions. That's what we're here for, right? It's, are you comfortable, confident, and capable of asking some really, really good questions up front, right? And then come to us and then leverage our expertise. I look at something as simple as a buy-sell agreement, right? 25 years in the business, the buy-sell agreement just had an overhaul last fall with the Connolly case. Something that we held near and dear for 2 decades in one Supreme Court decision completely changed, right? Our industry completely in its constant evolution, okay? But the hopes, dreams, desires, and fears of the client, those are pretty static. We need to figure out, you go find those things out, identify the problem, come to us to find the solution, and make sure those businesses are protected.
Well, that is some great stuff, and I appreciate you joining in here today, Phil. I think hopefully our advisors found some great stuff today. And really, just again, thank you for joining us today. So
anytime, I'm always happy to talk shop.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up today, I'd like to remind you that today's brew and our entire library of brews are recorded and shared on the brew page on our website, www.e4.insurance. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up with all the brewcasts. They're released every Wednesday. Next week, we will not have a brew since we're doing our Building Business Together event in Wisconsin. So please watch LinkedIn, our website, and our newsletter to see what May has in store for you. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time on The Brew.